You are all in denial. By any objective measure, the euro is a failure. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. So what are you saying? That this isn't quite as bad as the USSR? I had totally underestimated the complete fanaticism, Mr. Barroso, of you, your College of Commissioners and the European Central Bank. Yes, it'll mean you'll lose your job, Mr. Barroso, but apart from that, why can't we do things as mature democracies? Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schulz, as well. I want you all fired. You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you?
These were just some few sequences of the most known speeches of Mr. Nigel Farage, and I'm very glad to say hello to Mr. Farage.
Hello.
Welcome to Secvențial, and I'm very glad that we can speak directly because you are very well known in Romania already. And I want to ask you first, when you became an Eurosceptic, you were born like this?
No, I wasn't born a Eurosceptic. No, in fact, I mean, we joined the European Club nearly 40 years ago, and I was below voting age. But the general idea and perception was that we joined something that was about free trade, cooperation, and being good neighbours in Europe. So it all made good sense. But just like communism, which was the big idea that went before Euro-federalism, very often the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I became more and more sceptical as the 1990s went on. But the key moment for me was in 2005. There was a European constitution that had been drafted by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the former French president, and it was put to a referendum in France, and the French said no. It was then put to a referendum in the Netherlands, and they overwhelmingly said no. And I thought, well, that's that. Political integration in the EU will stop because the voters have spoken. And here, in this Parliament, and up the road at the Commission, they willfully decided just to rebrand it as the Lisbon Treaty, to keep all the same powers, and to push it through without referendums. And that was the moment at which I realised that the EU was no longer a club of sovereign nation states working together. It had become, in a sense, its own proto-dictatorship. And I have been a vehement opponent of this European Union, of the idea that 500 million people should be governed by unelected bureaucrats, and all my worst predictions, frankly, have come true. We saw an Italian Prime Minister removed by the bully boys of Brussels. We indeed saw a Greek Prime Minister removed by the bully boys of Brussels, and we saw your country, which held a referendum, to be told by Brussels that basically it was invalid. This idea that we can take all these different countries in Europe, put them together in one new state under unelected bureaucracy will not work.
But why do you think that Europe stops to be the dream world that was designed by their inventors and was supported by those who believe in it?
Well, those that believe in it are idealists, and it's a very nice thing to be an idealist, but the idea that you can abolish nation states and roll everybody together under a new European identity can only happen if it's what the peoples of Europe want. But there is no evidence that anybody in any member state wants to abolish their democracies and transfer power to the European Commission and the other big officials based here in Brussels. And indeed, there's a warning from history in Europe, and it's called Yugoslavia, because in the 1920s we took separate different Balkan states, we forced them together into one without the consent of the people, and that has led in the last 20 years to the most horrendous civil wars and tens of thousands of people dying. And this European project is equally dangerous.
Looking to Europe these days, it looks like it's going under a unique German command. It's Mrs. Merkel, the Sturmbannführer of Europe, this moment now?
Well, that's a very strongly worded question, which I'm going to be slightly cautious in terms of how I answer it. I would say this: I don't think that Angela Merkel or modern-day Germany have set out with an ambition to dominate Europe, but I think by accident, since the crisis broke in 2008, since it became obvious that the Eurozone frankly cannot work without massive capital transfers from the northern Eurozone countries to the southern Eurozone countries, and given the sheer incompetence of the leaders in Brussels and the fact they've got no charisma or leadership skills, and I'm talking about Mr. Barroso and Mr. Van Rompuy, who frankly do not command respect, I think because of that, Angela Merkel has stepped into the breach, and she clearly now is the boss in Europe and is calling the shots. And just a few weeks ago we saw her visit Athens, and she was greeted by people dressed up in Nazi uniforms, swastikas, and giving Nazi salutes. I mean, amazing, isn't it, that the project that was designed to bring us all together has now split Europe from north to south in the Eurozone, and now there is great enmity between northern and southern states.
And how do you think that the future looks regarding to this present situation?
Very bad. You can be very thankful in Romania that you're not part of the Eurozone, and for goodness sake,
really?
don't ever join it. Listen, I think that in those southern Mediterranean countries, the recipes that are being put in place for economies that are already in a downward deflation spiral, with youth unemployment rates now pushing up to 60%, with all semblance of democracy, with all idea that you as a voter can change your future course of direction for your country, all that's gone. And we've got people now who are increasingly becoming desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. And I think the real risk now is that we will see not just demonstrations in southern Europe, but large-scale violence on a frankly, I think of a size that it is difficult for us at the moment to even contemplate.
You said before that you are informed about what happens in Romania this summer with the referendum, when 7.5 million people said that the president have to leave the power, but with 900,000 votes only, and with the pressure coming from Mr. Barroso, from Mr. Rompuy, from Mrs. Reding, he's still in power, of course, also with the weakness of the new government. This is a new situation in Romania, because a lot of people who are very enthusiastic regarding the European Union, now they are frustrated and they are looking with skepticism what's happened in Europe. Do you think that's a long-term consequence of this attitude of Mr. Barroso and the others?
Well, you know, I went to Romania shortly before you joined the European Union. There was no question in my mind that people were not told the truth about what the European Union was that they were joining. And I would say the behaviour after your referendum over the course of this summer and the autumn says to me, welcome to the new European club, Romania. You've just given up your independence, you've sold your democracy, your officials and politicians are now all very rich men and women, so they couldn't care less. But if you're an ordinary, decent, working Romanian who wants to live in a democracy, that has now gone. It has been transferred across to this European Union. So wake up and do something about it.
Okay, but now it's a question about how people are looking to the new European construction, because we are discussing about the United States of Europe, and for instance, people saw that somebody can decide over their head how it's going in their own country, who is ruling their own country, behind the vote, behind the democracy and so on.
Well, I mean, really, if you think about it, what Romania has done is 20 years ago, you left a centralised, undemocratic form of government called communism. You had a few brief years of running your own affairs, and you've now joined an updated, slightly more modern form of that same old communist system. Romania, as with all the rest of us, now becomes a province of this new European power, and a province in which democracy and the ballot box, frankly, count for nothing.
You know, Romania is under a special financial accord with IMF and the European Union, and because of this, and of course because of the crisis, a lot of severe measures of austerity was taken this year and hit a lot of people, millions of people. Next year we have to start to pay back what we took from IMF and European Union, and unfortunately the recession is continuing to be very present in Romania. How do you think that could manage a new government, because we have election, as you know, a new government to put a balance between these two major challenges in front of him?
Well, the one thing that you must do is to thank your lucky stars that, unlike Greece and Spain and Portugal, that you're not in the euro, because not only would you be being asked to pay back large sums of money, but you would also be trapped inside a currency massively overvalued for where you are. So that is at least one advantage that you have. In terms of the simple question, you know, how does the government in Romania get the economy moving in an attempt to bring back growth and make paying back these debts possible? I do not have a simple answer to that. And I'm afraid that the sheer scale and longevity of the recession that is happening across Europe is deeper and longer, I think, than anybody thought. And I don't think it's going to go away for a long time. I think the euro crisis will rumble on for a decade, and I suspect that the IMF and all the other institutions to whom you owe money will have to, at some point, rethink the payment terms.
But do you think that not only Romania, but also other countries in Europe have to say stop to the austerity and go for active measures for launching the economies and so on? Because for 3 or 4 years, only cuts, cuts, cuts.
Yeah, I think that certainly as far as the Eurozone is concerned, once those countries leave the Eurozone, get devalued currencies and get competitiveness, then we can start to see, I think, some green shoots of recovery, certainly in the Mediterranean countries. But the problem with all of that is that the chaos that will be caused, the short-term chaos that will be caused by the breakup of the Eurozone is in fact going to put the banking system in Europe under even greater pressure. And to be honest with you, I see no cause for optimism at the moment. I think the austerity programs will continue. The bully boys in Brussels will make sure of that. And I think we're headed, all of us actually, for a few very difficult years indeed.
But coming back to your question that we put it also in the recorded speeches of you, who the hell do you think Mr. Barroso it is, and Mr. Rompuy also, for giving so many strict solutions to everybody, just from on the top of the palace in Brussels?
Well, I mean, these guys that have absolute power over how we live our lives in Europe, over 500 million people, are people that haven't been elected. They've been appointed by their own friends, their own self-serving political class, and because of that, in my opinion, they have no legitimacy whatsoever. So this whole European construction, powerful though it may appear to be at this moment in time, I think will fall at some point in the future. You cannot build a state and without the active encouragement and support of the peoples of Europe. And all of us, we in Britain, you in Romania, you've all joined the European Union, frankly on a false prospectus, believing it would be something rather different to what it is, and the common thing. And yes, you've seen a rise in Euroscepticism since the referendum, but actually north, south, east and west, right across this continent of ours, hundreds of millions of people are saying we do not want a European Union configured like this. We want something different, we want something better, we want a Europe that is based on trade and cooperation, but not a Europe where we surrender the ability to control our economies and run our own lives.
These days in Brussels, the future of Europe is discussed because there are conflicts regarding the next budget for the European Union. And of course in Bucharest also there are disputes because the president considered that we are too small to ask for more money, and our attitude has to be one of diplomatic solutions, just negotiate. On the other hand, the Prime Minister said that we have to hit the table to ask for more and maybe to obtain more. Which of them is right?
Well, I mean, neither of them is right. I mean, look, you know, if Romanian politicians think Europe is a good thing because they're going to go on giving you money, then frankly what they've done is to sell your birthright, sell your independence, sell your liberty and freedom just for some short-term cash. And this being implemented by a political class who, as I say, have enriched themselves massively by Romania joining the European Union. I don't think this system works. The reason, of course, that the budget negotiations have stalled for the moment is that, frankly, the north of Europe, the wealthier part of Europe, is getting increasingly tired of paying money to southern countries in Europe, and who can blame them when times are not as good, even in the wealthier northern countries. And I think this wrangle over budgets that is going on just shows you really how split and divided Europe really is.
So this means the small countries, let's say, will be worse paid from the budget of the European Union in the next
I mean, ultimately, it's the big countries that now run the European Union. The little countries have very little say. Some may continue to get money, some may not, but this is now a Europe run by the big countries, by the big bosses, and by people that you can't vote for. And as I say, I think it really is a peripheral, ridiculous debate to say, well, if we get a little bit more money, that'll be absolutely fine. How can it be fine for Romania to get a little bit more money when you've just held a national referendum that Brussels has effectively overturned? How can that be acceptable? Better, frankly, to be a bit poorer and be free.
Do you think next year will be worse than 2012? In economical terms, first of all, of course.
I think that the big risk of a serious hit in the European banking system, particularly the Spanish banking system, is still very real. I have no idea whether that will happen in 2013 or not, but I would say still, overhanging the European economy, the downside risks are very much greater than the potential for upside growth.
I have two more short questions for you at the end of this interview. One of them is, if you will be designated as a messenger for these 7.5 angry Romanians after the referendum, what you'll tell to Mr. Barroso?
Well, frankly, what I would tell to Mr. Barroso is what I've told him so many times before in some of those speeches that you showed at the start of this interview, which is, you are bad people, you are bully boys, you ignored the no vote in France in a referendum, you ignored the no vote in the Netherlands in a referendum, twice you've ignored no votes in Ireland, you've already removed a Prime Minister of Greece, a Prime Minister of Italy, and now, true to form, you're ignoring the wishes of the people of Romania. And you know what? He won't listen to any of it because he couldn't care less.
This is bad. This is bad. You don't want to be a Romanian candidate for the next elections?
Well, it's very sweet of you. I'd love to come and stand in Romania, but right at the minute, I think my plate is rather full with what I have to do back in the United Kingdom. But one of the things that I have tried to do here in the European Parliament, leading a group in the European Parliament, is to try to make a positive, not just a negative, but a positive argument that the people of Europe, the countries of Europe, deserve something much better than we've got today. And I hope and pray that in 10 or 15 years' time, we have a Europe where we all sit round the table as friends, as trading partners, and cooperate, but we don't give away our democracy and our power to people who, frankly, have gone crazy with it and whose system is, by the day, beginning to resemble the very communism that disappeared 20 years ago.
We preserve your optimistic conclusion coming from an Eurosceptic. It's very valuable. So thank you again for your time, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
I hope the Romanians have to learn from your lesson of dignity in front of those who are leading Europe. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.